This is a long countdown.
Oh,
Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm Amy Stone, and this is the Creator Roundtable. So, what we're doing here is simple, and I think it's kind of terrific. We're here to have an honest conversation between women who are involved in independent new media, podcasts, YouTube channels, and so on. And it could be lots of stuff we don't even know yet. There's no subject matter slant. There's no teaching. This is not a webinar. It's not a sales pitch. There's no right or wrong answers. It is a conversation between creators. The topic for today is audience and community. And I'm going to introduce the panelists. Okay, here we go. Julie Marty Pearson. Welcome. She's got 3 shows, you guys. Dr. Julie Marty Pearson. Her 3 shows are podcast, Your Story, Still Becoming, Women Unmuted, and The Story of My Pet. Is that right? All right, there we go. Welcome, Julie. This is not her first time on the show. Next guest, new to the panel. I'm super excited to introduce you to Kelly Garthwaite. She's really brave. This is her first interview with me at all in any sort of way. Next, we have my real life friend, Samantha Foote. She was a guest on The Art of Imperfect Adulting, episode 57, I think, and I've met her a couple times in person. Her show is Every Brain is Different, and I happen to know that Samantha is a Taylor Swift fan. Here we go. You guys, welcome very much to the Creator Roundtable. I'm happy you're here. Are you ready for a fun conversation?
Yes,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Let's do it. We're going to go for an hour. We're going to stop right at the top of the hour, and it's going to be super fun. All right, here we go. Question number 1, you guys. What word when you think of the people who are in your audience, what word comes to mind for you? Is it audience? Is it community? Is it followers? Is it fans? Is it something else that I haven't even thought of? I'm going to pick on Julie first. Dr. Julie, what do you have to add to this conversation?
so I was thinking about this and I find myself using the word community the most. I think I use, come join my community as a part of my community. And it doesn't necessarily mean one thing, but I feel like all the different places I hang out, network, I'm a member of, kind of constitute community. And I do believe my listeners of my podcast are a part of that too. I think the only time I use different words is if I'm being specific to, like, follow me on Instagram, or I have this many followers, or I have this many subscribers on Substack or YouTube. So I think I use specific words for specific platforms, but in general, how I talk and write is I use community as kind of a catch-all.
I love that answer. Kelly, what do you think?
I'm going to second that. I've actually been saying community a lot lately because I don't really love the term followers. It feels very culty to me. And I also just think that going forward into the future in the next 4 or 5 years, because of AI, automation, all these other things that are making people really want to be together and connect and feel like there's something bigger than just themselves, community is really more the direction that we're going to be going in. And so I'm actually trying to build something that's bigger than just my podcast. The podcast was the beginning, and then I'm going to expand from there and make it into a bigger community experience. So I
That's
love
the
community.
dream. Yeah, that's the dream,
Yes.
right? Exactly.
Yes.
It's gonna be... All right, Samantha, my friend, what word do you use when you talk about this?
I have a community, so I talk about that. But then when I'm like actively speaking in my podcast, I always say for those listening because I don't know what to say. I don't like saying audience. I don't like saying followers. I want to say community, but then I'm like, well, anyway, so that's what I say. I say for those listening or for parents or whatever. But
And
yeah,
is
but
your show audio only, or do you also put it out in video?
I put it out in video too.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure what to say or what to write, and my show notes are all over the place. It's like, for listeners, for watching, if you're in the audience, whoever you are, please, follow along.
Yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
I think what Samantha said about parents, because that's like who she's speaking to, that sometimes the podcast is different. Like for me, my pet podcast, I always say, pet parents or pet lovers, or at the end, I always say much love to you and your pets, which I obviously don't use any of those words on my other podcasts. So I do think sometimes it's specific to the platform or what you're talking about, but I never really use those words outside of just when I'm recording that podcast. So,
do you ever get tripped up with all of your shows, who you're talking to at any given time? Do you ever are you ever talking to a female podcaster and you're like, oh, and let's talk about your cat? No, I'm kidding.
Right. Well, the nice thing about having several podcasts is I can do one interview and use parts of it for different things. For example, I had the president of a professional hockey team come on to talk because one of their big community support is they do dog adoption events at their games when they have home games on certain days of the month. But she is a woman in professional hockey, men's professional hockey, and so I also asked her about how the heck did you get into this and what is it like being a woman and what does that look like. Exactly. And so I'm also going to take part of that and use it along with a second interview I did with another woman in sports from one of my other podcasts. So sometimes it's actually fun because I do talk to people about different things, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. Kind of went off topic, but
it did. That's Tony
I
Will,
don't
right?
really-
That's Tony Will, the GM
Yes.
of the Kalamazoo something or others Wings, maybe.
She's the second one I interviewed. The first one, it is the Chicago Wolves hockey.
Oh,
they
you've got
actually reached
two?
out.
Okay.
I've got two. So, and it's interesting because I originally interviewed someone else from the hockey team about the dog adoptions and all of that. And when I saw that their president was a woman, I was like, that's interesting. I actually asked my contact, well, would she be interested in being interviewed too? So yes, they get 2 pet podcast episodes, but I was more interested in the other piece, and I thought that was the easiest way to tie into it.
Are you a hockey fan, Julie?
I'm not, although, you know,
All right,
you
we're
are
off
now.
topic. We're totally
I
off
enjoyed heated rivalry, but and I did talk to Tony about that and the whole like how hockey has become so mainstream because of these books and TV shows and stuff. So you just never know. We had a whole conversation about that, and saying that is you just kind of never know where a conversation's going to take you sometimes either.
All right, very good, very good. All right, next question. When do you remember that you first realized that you even had an audience? And then if you have a community or anything different, was there a separate moment? Samantha, because you have both, do you want to weigh in on this? When did you realize that people were listening and that you had an audience or a community?
I remember after I started my podcast, people were like, we listened to your podcast. This was such a helpful episode, but nobody and I saw that I had downloads and stuff, but I was like, are real people listening? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually like real people are listening and real people are responding to this. So that was super cool. And then the community came in when people started sharing with me like, oh, this helped me so much. This helped me know that I'm not alone and other people are going through what I'm going through. And so that's when I realized that I was building a community.
That is a beautiful answer. So, and you had an existing business long before you launched your podcast, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah. So I had my music therapy business that started in 2013. And then when I launched the podcast, I launched the parenting consulting part of that. And that's like the parenting community. But yeah, I had the music therapy business for a while before that.
Very cool. Very cool. Kelly, how about you? When did you guys first realize, because you're a co-host, right, Kelly? You've got somebody else that you share the show with. When did you guys first realize that you had an audience? And when did it shift to community, if there was a shift?
So I keep talking about the fact that I am in the messy middle, which I feel like a lot of people resonate with. And now that I'm talking about it more, I'm like, oh, there's community in this too. Because all of these women are sitting here rethinking, like I'm 42, right? Yeah, I was born in 1983. It's hard to remember sometimes, but I realized that almost every single woman I talked to recently is in this kind of like midlife awakening and asking like, is what I've been doing been working for me? Is it still working for me going forward? And so I'm actually going to be talking more about the messy middle as I go. And I feel like Julie right now, I'm like, did I answer the question?
So when did you realize that you had an audience?
But
When was the first thing that happened? You were like, oh my gosh, people are paying attention.
so it's been trickling in. So we started last October, and it was like my mom was my biggest fan, and she's still my biggest fan. But and then a lot of our friends, and so it's kind of been growing. It's like been slow growth.
Yeah.
And I did the opposite. The podcast. I used to work for Red Bull Media House. I was leading the photo operations team. That wasn't really working for me anymore. I left, wasn't sure what direction I was going to go in. I just knew I needed to go towards something else and use my voice. So the podcast came about a year or so after I left that job. And I I haven't it's this like figuring out where we're going kind of thing. And so the audience is like kind of this living, growing thing. It's not
Yeah.
exactly.
No, I hear you. And I think that you hit on something, and I'll pass it to Julie in a second. But at the beginning of any of these projects, it is a lot about, unless you come from, a true celebrity background, something
Yes.
that we should all talk about more openly is that there is that speaking into an empty room feeling. And
Yes.
is anybody out there? Julie, what's the first time my first like public project was a blog that I thought was just a thing back and forth between me and my brother. And then somebody in Hawaii left a comment, and I was like, "What has happened?" And so, Julie, when is
So
the
awesome.
first time that you realized you had an audience?
Well, I will say it was also a while back. So, like, I want to say 2014, 2015. I was working at a university in LA. I was living on campus during the week and coming home on the weekends. And so, one of the things I did, I think, to fill time was I created an Instagram for my cat, Frenchie. And that was the first time where I had something where people actually were actively following me and commenting. And we all know cats built the internet, and they even built. And so it's funny because that Instagram account became the story of my pet account because it already had 4,000 followers, and I'm like, why would I start at zero for something that's still about pets? But with the podcast itself, because that, I started back, it wasn't related to my business. I was doing career coaching at the time. And so my first episodes were messy and unedited and just getting friends on Zoom to talk about pets and our childhood pets. And so the first few downloads were like, whoa, someone's listening and it's not just me and my family. But then the big thing I think for me was when people started asking to be a guest. That's kind of when I thought, oh, okay, so there's something here. And then I noticed that a lot of people reaching out were women like me in their 30s, 40s, and up who didn't have kids, who were animal lovers, who loved helping animals, and it was some big part of their life in some way, whether it was their work or their volunteering. And so for me, I started feeling a sense of community because I was connecting with women that I always felt very alone. I didn't have a lot of friends who were not having kids and not moms. So that's where my sense of real community started. And I was also very lucky to be a part of an actual paid membership community for podcasting early on with Tiffany Seiss and David. I just blanked on his last name. Not That's why I did it wrong. Tiffany Kane and David Seiss. Sorry, I messed up their names. But they created a very safe, welcoming, loving kind of family for me and other podcasters. And so that's now what I try to mimic. So for me, it was like twofold of realizing people are listening and want to be a part of this, but there's also other places for me to connect with other podcasters who are trying to figure it out.
All right, I
Oh,
love that. I
I
love
want to,
that. Kelly, go for
I
it.
want, I just wanted to say, you're making me realize that I'm doing better than I think because there are people reaching out asking to be a guest on our podcast. Yay, yay, right? Yeah.
No, yeah,
And
that's good.
so thank you. Thanks for that. You didn't know that you did that to me, but thank you.
I think it's an important thing to say because a lot of times podcasting is like we're speaking into a void. And
Yeah.
even though we see downloads, there's no real faces. So when someone reaches out and it's not a copy and paste and they're like, oh, I love this, or this spoke to me, or this episode was great and I'd love to come on and share this, like that's the connection for me that I didn't expect, but I love.
And from the one of the things about this format with the creators coming in and not vendors and not gurus and experts, is that everybody who's involved is actually, doing it at some point. And you do have different conversations with people. So like, if you go to a show, like a conference, and somebody who's established and has, millions of downloads for every episode, they talk from the stage, sometimes it can feel very disconnected from what we're actually experiencing. And so I just would jump in there and say that's one of the inspirations for this format. And then early on, Samantha and I had a conversation where she and I were like, well, it's like, once you start, how do you find the people who are, I've started, how do I get to, version 1.5? And so that's what, hopefully these conversations will lead to that. And I appreciate you speaking out and saying it was helpful, Kelly. I do. All right. So here we go. Do we think that there's actually a difference between audience and community, or is this just words and things people are saying? Is it just vocabulary, or is there like a real difference between these two things? Kelly, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're good at that. What do you think?
Oh, thank you. Okay. This feels like Go Fact Yourself on NPR or something, where it's like, what's the difference between audience and community? Audience feels to me like there's an engagement with community. With audience, there's an engagement, but it's more disconnected. Like what you were just talking about with the million downloads episode. That feels like the audience, but then the community feels engaged in a much more connected way. So yes, I do think there is a difference,
All right.
but
Very good.
they're kind of interconnected in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, they're just words. So, like, we get to decide. Julie and Samantha, which of you wants to jump in and say if you think there's actually a difference or if it's just semantics?
I was going to say something similar where I feel like when I think of audience, it's like me talking to people or speaking at people or teaching people, like, you know, but more as a community, it's a mutual, it's a connection, it's a back and forth. And so that's why I love guests, I think, because I feel like it's more community than audience when I have another guest and we're just going back and forth. And like doing these roundtables, and I've started doing some panels for my other podcast. It's fun because it's totally different when it's 3 or 4 people versus 2 versus 1. And so I do feel more like I'm working on when I do a solo, not speaking like I'm speaking at people, like at an audience. And I want it to feel more of a community exchange. So,
What do you think, Sam? Samantha?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, oh, you can say Sam, whatever. Um, so I think the way I do things is I am an audience member first with podcasts that I listen to. And then as they draw me in, I want to be part of the community. Like I will send them messages. I will send them, like, I'll comment on their stuff on like Instagram or whatever. And I try to be a bigger part of what they're doing. And I think that's the difference between an audience member and a community member. I feel like an audience member is just like kind of lurking in the background, where a community member is like fully engaged and wants to be part of something bigger.
I think that's fair. I think that's very good. And I know it's like a little bit like beating a dead horse with me in the semantics. And we're going to do one more of those really silly like things. So just yes or no, we're going to go around and we're just going to say whether or not we think, it's me trying to mix up the variety. Do you think that the vocabulary that we use matters? Yes or no? Samantha, do you think it matters, or you think people just figure it out as they go?
I think it matters for what your intention is. Like, as a podcaster, do you want just to have fans of your podcast and then have them get sponsors for your show and have them support the sponsors? Or do you want them to be engaged in a community that you build and a way to support them? Or it just depends on what your intention for the podcast is, I think. So yeah, I think it does matter, because then it tells your followers, community, whatever audience, what you want them to do. So I always invite people to be a part of my community. I'm like, come be a part of the community. Where if I was just a show with sponsors and I didn't have anything else, I would say, like, come support these sponsors of my show. So I think it just depends on what your intention is.
That's Samantha practicing her sponsor pitch right there live in the future when I say thank you to the sponsors. Kelly, what about you? Yes or no? Do you think the vocabulary matters?
Yeah, I think kind of what Samantha was saying, it's the intention behind it. It's like if you're interested in being intentional and building something in a certain way, then you do have to get that point across because it's easy to think that people are going to get what you're saying or that if you don't communicate and it's, I don't know, people are really not good at filling in the blanks, which I've realized, and I give people more credit than I probably should sometimes. And that's been a huge thing. That's been a huge learning through this whole process is you have to be very direct and speak exactly to the people who are your audience or your community. But
Yeah.
as you're figuring it out, there's so much experimentation going on. So
Yeah.
like
I mean, and
you
sometimes
don't
I will say I'm in the audience, not able to figure it out. I'm like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing here. So
yeah.
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 Yeah, I think that's fair. I do. I think that's fair. Julie, what do you think about it? Do you think now I'm asking the teacher. Julie is a professor, like, so I could write her answer for her. But Julie, what do you think? Do you think the vocabulary matters?
I absolutely think it does. And I was thinking about it as you guys were talking, that I was thinking about it as myself as a follower or a fan or a listener, that there are influencers, there are people on social, there are podcasters that are so good at this that I feel like we're friends and I could just DM them something personal and be like, why did I just tell that person this about myself? But it's the way they cultivate it, right? Versus someone who speaks differently than that, to speaks more like to followers, to fans, like they're inanimate objects. So for me, I was thinking about it from the other side. And as a host, I hope I'm doing it, but we all have to get better at it. But I like what Samantha said about talking about it in the podcast about like, come join the community. I mean, that's why I have a community, is to support people in the podcasting space. So I just have to talk about it like that versus something that I'm trying to sell.
Yeah, I didn't write any questions about that parasocial fandom for this because it's kind of its own conversation where, we feel like we have a connection with people that we may have never ever met. So I didn't bring that topic up specifically because I didn't know how to ask it, but that is a whole thing where, yes, 100%. That is a whole thing. Okay. So now that I've beaten the vocabulary semantics horse to death, let's talk about analytics. Because, we have these shows and we're looking at where they're going and who's watching and who's listening and who's responding to our emails and all of those things. So do we think that creator platforms and social media platforms analytics are helpful for growth? Or if not, what is? All right. So who should go first? Let's see. Julie, you get to go first. I just started dead air while I was like slappy hosting. Sorry.
You know me, I love data. I'm a data person, but I hate that there's data in so many different places and it's not necessarily makes sense together. So I think that's where I have a hard time. And I don't look at them as much as I did early on in podcasting because I know that it's all relative and subjective to, different reasons. But I do think that those things are helpful because sometimes I need to see engagement to realize, oh, wow, I have not been on here or I have not been doing this. I notice it in Instagram a lot because now you can see like how many people you've reached on your profile and the numbers go all over the place. And so I'm like, I don't know that it's helped me to grow my community, but it does help me to see where my people hang out more. Where are they most active? Because if they're already active there, that's where I should spend more time because it's easier to make already active space more active than a space that's like kind of slow and not really engaging. So that's kind of what I tried to do, but I don't know how well I'm doing it.
And then you have, because you have a community that's not hosted on social media. So you've got like podcast analytics, YouTube analytics, social analytics, and then you've got the community showing up for your events. Yeah. Samantha,
and
yes.
I was just going to say that's a good point. It just made me realize I'm not even tracking the show up rates at my own events, like in my community. And that's probably something I should do. So
How about, okay, so then Samantha, I'm going to go to you because I know you have a community, you have a podcast, you have a business that has a clientele. They're all separate little pockets. Do you think that the podcast analytics, the social media analytics, do those relate at all? Are they helpful for running and growing your community, or is it a totally different ball of wax?
I think the analytics, for me at least, help with audience members and getting new people to come to the podcast and getting people to stay and listen to the podcast and figuring out what they like. Because you can see, like, how long do people actually listen to the podcast when they're listening, or like what percentage of the episode do they listen to? What episodes hit more with people? Like, did more people listen to? So you can figure out what your audience wants to hear, and then you can, I don't use analytics as much as I should, but I feel like you can then cultivate those people to be in your community, and looking at the analytics of what they like, what they're listening to, you can put more of that in the community for them to, get more information on. So I think that's really helpful. And then just for engagement on social media, you can see where people drop off and they don't, like, how long do they look at your reel or your YouTube video or whatever. And you can see, like, what was I doing in that moment that they dropped off, or what did I change to? At Podfest, when you were at Podfest,
I
we
was.
listened to Pat Flynn. And when he said that, he was like, yeah, the way I make my YouTube videos better is I look, when do people stop watching?
Yeah.
What was I doing? And I think that's super important, because then you get a lot of information about what people find interesting, what people don't find interesting, what they want to know more about. And so, yeah, I just think it's important to look at that stuff so you know what your community wants. But also just talk to people and don't just rely completely on the analytics. Like, I send out emails and be like, what do you want me to talk about? What are your questions? And so I don't rely solely just on analytics to tell me what people are interested in.
Yeah, I think that I think that's a really good point, that, analytics are analytics, but they're one-sided. That was a great time to spend with you, by the way, Sam. It was really, really good.
Yeah.
Kelly, what about you? Like, in your view of growing the community, because you're looking forward into growth and community and you have a big vision, what do you think about the analytics and platform stuff that you're seeing right now? Is the data that you're getting helpful, or are there other things you'd like to see? Like, what is it?
I feel like I'm less than a year into this podcast, and it's been somewhat helpful, but it's also confusing because I'm doing a lot of experimenting. So I'm like, I don't know if I should take this data for this particular thing and like apply it to everything else I'm doing. And that's also like not really I'm big on intuition and following my gut and doing the things that I feel are authentic to me with what I'm putting out there. And so I can't limit myself just based off of whatever the analytics are telling me. I'm also really big on connecting with other humans. So I have a huge following connection community on LinkedIn. I've been using that a lot as far as connecting with other women. In the episodes, we're saying specifically, like, we have a hotline. So it's like, if you have something that you'd like to comment on or bring to this conversation, then leave us a voicemail. So we have all of these different ways that people can engage with us that the analytics are not going to measure at all. And so I think it's important to take away some of the data and use that for like whatever you're going to do going forward. But for me, it's been really big about like following what's pulling me from my inner voice and going towards the thing that seems like it's going to make the most sense.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think those are two sides. So to recap, Samantha was like, personal feedback from people directly is a different thing than the analytics on the screen. And
Yes.
Kelly leaned into, there's a human element of this, that, you are the person who's building it. You've got your gut feeling and also your alignment. Like for me, if people came and when people push back and say, hey, you should do this, if I don't want to do it, right? If it's not like
Yes.
aligned with what I want to do, I'm like, well, okay, but No. Like, right. So, and not surprisingly, the one that is, that went through grad school doing statistics was like, give me all of the data. And she's like, actually, there's more data that I could look at, even more that I should pay attention to. So
I will be honest though, I don't look at it nearly as much as I used to because I think it is more about the connection and that the data isn't really going to tell me that. And I want to becoming someone that does more of what Kelly was talking about, which is asking people to tell me what they want me to talk about or what questions they have, or taking questions I get other places and creating content around that. I think that's much more important in terms of growth than the specific data of downloads and where people listen.
yeah.
So that's something I'm working on for sure.
I think
It's
that
also
some of it is, and I'll pull on the thread of Pat Flynn, right? Where he was showing us that, and I remember watching. He's got this huge YouTube channel, and he's showing us the drop off. And one of the very first thoughts I had when he showed us, I was like, step one, have somebody watch the video. Have enough people watch the video that you have any data, right? And so, like, some of it is like if you have to have the data, and the same kind of thing, like working on the project for the collective that I'm working on. I had to start by asking people, like, say, hey, will you talk to me about this? Because I don't have any content out there about this. And one of the things I found that was really interesting is that during a 30-minute conversation, how people would answer would sort of shift based on how much they began to trust me. And having a
yes.
conversation. And I don't know that I don't know that shows up in data. Maybe it does. Maybe if I knew more about it. Kelly, I cut you off. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I've been getting messages from people like on LinkedIn or email, wherever, being like, hey, I listened to this episode and I loved it and it resonated with me. And I don't know, like, I got one today from somebody who I met at a networking event, and she just decided that she wanted to tell me that she liked the episode. I'm like, I don't know if she's someone who's following or if she's like, there's all of these missing pieces, I think, that we're not getting just from looking at the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, and, with the exception of the guys who pop in every day and they're like, hi, I'd like to help
Yeah.
you with your YouTube growth.
Oh my God.
We know exactly where they are, right?
Bye.
Do you now? Do you? All right, here we go. So some experts are advising people to do things like, oh, where did my little screen go? Hold on, you guys. People who are. It's live. It really is live. Some experts are advising us to do things like build community but not audience, or audience scales and community doesn't. Right? I don't know if you guys are seeing that kind of stuff on the places where you are seeing things. But when you hear stuff like that, is it to you as an indie creator? Do you think that they work? Do you think it's truth? Are you listening to it? Is it helpful? Where are you guys with experts and what they're talking about with audience and community? Let's go with Samantha, who I know is tapped in to feedback from people, and going to conferences and things.
Yeah, I think you just do what you want. There's so much conflicting advice out there for what to do that I honestly just do what I want. Like, I say what I want. I do look at analytics, but then if I have a podcast episode that I really want to do or I'm really passionate about, I just do it. And people will come along with me or they won't, and that's fine. But with that, I think, like, build the audience, not the community. In my mind, you should build your community because then they're more likely to buy from you because they're more invested than just being an audience member. If, like, in my brain, an audience member is less involved, less engaged. So yeah, I just kind of tune a lot of that out because everyone has their own opinion and it's so conflicting that I don't even know who to listen to. So I just do what I want.
Yeah, and for some people, they draw the line, like the people who are in community are paying them. So like if you're part, like on some of the Patreon and Substack and all of those places, people, it's like, that's behind the paywall. You become a part of community. So it just means different things to different people. I totally agree. Julie, what do you think? You are also a person who's very involved in listening, trying to figure out what works and all kind of things. What do you think when experts and gurus and pontificates and all these other people are telling us what we should do. What do you think?
Well, I think my biggest red flag for experts is when they say this is the one way to do it, because that's
Mm-hmm.
not true, and I've learned that there's 10 different ways to do anything, and every aspect of podcasting you can do it differently, from editing to recording to finding guests, all those things. And I always tell people in my community or my clients, like, I'm telling you my experience, and what I'm doing is testing things so I can give you my opinion. Does that mean there isn't something else that might work better for you? Possibly. I'm just telling you what I use, what I like, what works for me, and why. I do have people say to me, so what should I do? What's the way to launch? What's the right way? And I'm like, well, it depends on who you are, what you're trying to do with this, and what your end goal is, right? So I
Yeah.
always bring people back to their why and their goal. And so it's sometimes I have to remind myself of that for myself. And a big part of my podcast is growing my community, the free and the paid parts, so that people become a part of it and then are more likely to work with me in other ways.
How to correctly launch a show. Step 1, be a Hollywood celebrity.
Mm.
Callie, what do you think? First of all, because you've mentioned that you're very much in the growth phase of this, trying a lot of things, experimenting. Do you find that you are hearing and seeing promotions and industry feedback about, like, here are ways you should do it, and this is the right way to do audience versus community? Is that coming up for you, and what do you feel about it?
Some of this stuff sounds like a bunch of men just telling everybody else what they should be doing, and I really like to block that out a lot of the times. I have done research and looked up certain things like how to monetize and how to do, but I think that it's so case by case basis, and I don't like. We got a couple of marketing affiliate sponsors early on. One because I had a relationship, the second one
Yeah.
because I had a relationship. And we haven't made a lot of money off of these things yet, but it was like, I'm going to ask and see what someone would say. And here's our discount code. And so I don't think that it's necessarily about like A plus B equals C. If you do this, then you'll be able to make this amount of money. And I do, again, to hit it home, I have to block a lot of that stuff out because have, I grew up with baby boomer parents and a society that told me that I had to ask for permission for everything. And this feels like following the process that someone else is telling me and having to ask for permission for things to look a certain way. So I kind of reject it a little bit.
I love that answer. It takes 30 minutes before people, like, it's like the clock hits 30 minutes and then people are like, and we'll go deeper. And we'll go deeper. All right. So very
And
good.
I want to say something to that, though,
Yes.
too, is I always tell people who are just starting or have started a podcast, it's like, you're going to learn the most by doing it. You're going to
Yes.
figure out what feels right, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. And I also say it about guesting. Like, part of the reason I guest is to see what other hosts are doing,
Yeah.
and what I want to utilize in my own process, or the way they say certain things or ask certain questions. And so I think a lot of the quote expert advice is, if you want to do it just like me, then do it this way. But you're not just like them. No one's going to be the next Oprah or the next Mel Robbins, whether you like them or not.
Speak
Because
for
they
yourself.
came- but they came with an audience. We're building it.
Yes.
And also, we're going to build it the best way by being ourselves and going along the path that feels right to us.
Yeah. I think if we start trying to masquerade as someone else, then we lose the whole plot. And I've had to just like block it out because I get into my head too much. It gets into my psyche a lot if I listen to too many opinions.
Yeah.
I think that's really
Julie,
good.
I liked
for
what
it,
you
Sam.
said about, you tell people this is the way I do it. This is what's worked for me, but you might need to do something else. Something else might work better for you. And I feel like I trust people more like that. I
Mm-hmm.
trust people like that more because they're not saying there's only one right way. It's like that Instagrammer who had that like $1 million launch just recently, Jessie something. She did that. She says, I don't know if this will work for you. but this is what's worked for me. And that's what drew so many people to her, because she wasn't like, you have to do it like this or you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you saying that, because it's kind of true. Like, there's not one, like, I'm not going to tell parents this is the right way to parent. And if you don't parent like this, you're wrong. I'm going to tell parents this is what's worked for me. This is what research says. Something else might work for you.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
end.
The end. The
Yep.
end. All right. Have you ever been in a women's community that you felt was toxic, competitive, or exclusionary? That is a spicy meatball question. Spicy meatball question.
I think we all have been at some point. And I also think sometimes it evolves, right?
Yeah. It's also not really our faults in a way if we are attacking each other because it's this deep-rooted programming from the patriarchy and centuries of just deep-rooted psychological muck that we have to get through. So I always feel for women if there is a situation where they're being, I don't know, jealous or envious or something. Like there's something else going on under there. So I try to be compassionate in those circumstances. But yes,
yes. Samantha, have you ever been in a community which could fall into the category of toxic, overly competitive, punitively exclusionary?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like what Kelly said, in the man's world, you are taught like you need to be the best. You need to do this to be the best. You need to do this. And it's not super collaborative in my experience. And so women go into things thinking that they need to be competitive, or there's only like, you can't be collaborative, because if you're being collaborative with someone in your space, that means that they might get clients that would have came to you. And so I have worked with people who are very competitive, and they're like, we're not going to work with you because we're in the same field, where I'm just like, let's all be friends. Like for music therapy, for example, music therapy is so small, like very, like not very many people know about it. And so I was like, let's, in Idaho, at least where I am, I'm like, let's do a sensory friendly concert for the autism community to come to. And people were like, oh, yeah, I don't want to work with you. That's a good idea, but I don't want to work with you. And I'm like, because you're my competitor.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me. And so I found that when you're more collaborative and less competitive, you can raise music therapy for everyone to know about. And then there's enough people to go around for everyone.
yeah.
And so,
So
yeah.
then I have a follow-up question to that, because you touched on something which was I didn't know how many vocabulary words to throw at y'all. I probably should have run this by the professor on my team, Julie, when I was writing the questions. But, like there's a second community that could be there to collaborate with, which is like your peers in the music professionals organizations. And then the question becomes like, were you able to like find some people to collaborate and create that sense of community among the peers that was non-competitive? Not that that's what I'm trying to do with
Yeah.
creators or anything, but yes, go on.
Yeah. So somebody actually, when I got to Idaho, the people that were here said they wanted to collaborate, but it was not a very collaborative feeling. They did everything by themselves. And then someone moved here this year and they contacted me, and he said, I love what you're doing. You have a fantastic relationship and reputation in this area. Let's work together to make music therapy more well known among the people in this area. And I thought that was amazing. And so that's what I try to do with other people too. Like, even on my podcast, I had a coach that said, do not let parent consultants come on your show, because you're direct competitors. So don't let parent consultants come on your show. And I'm like, but they're slightly different. Like, someone that's going to come to me isn't going to go to them, because our styles are completely different.
Mhm.
And so I have found people to collaborate with that I love working with. And I found that you just build each other up. The more you build each other up, the more your like niche
Yeah.
builds up, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so anyway, yeah, I think it's super important.
The
And
abundance mentality.
Yeah.
yes.
Absolutely. All
And
right. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say I find this a lot too being a podcast coach, someone who helps people launch and grow. There's a lot of us. I know we're a dime a dozen. A lot of people help people, do this. But everybody has a different niche, a different perspective, a different road. And so, yeah, I go on other people's podcasts that's their business, but I talk about something else or I talk about something specific. Like I specifically work with indie podcasters. I teach people how to do it all themselves so they aren't reliant on me or someone else. And a lot of other people don't do that because they want them reliant on them or they want to do all the production part of it. And so for me, it's okay for that and it's okay for me to have other people on and it's okay for me to have other people on who also have podcast communities because we're all doing it a little differently and it's better to collaborate than see each other as competitors because I can't look at someone joining someone else's community as a negative to me. They found what they needed there and so they joined. And that doesn't necessarily have anything for or against me and what I'm doing. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard when I see people talking about they did this with somebody else and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. They never asked me to do it," right? So of course we're still in our heads, but I think what Samantha was saying is so important that collaboration isn't about competition. It's actually helping both of you guys kind of become more well known. But it also, people are going to go off the vibe. If they see people collaborating, working well together, they're going to want to work with you versus somebody that, is more competitive with others.
I think so. I think so. You guys have some good things to say here. You really, really do. Okay, so this question is actually related to that. We talked about, like, so we've had some words come up, right? Like patriarchy and the man's world and stuff like that. And, sometimes I do think, right? I do think there is this like idea that there's a very different way that women do things and men do things. I'm not an expert on this. Is it possible, though, that we are romanticizing how women sometimes show up for each other in community? Or do you really think, this is just opinion, you don't have to get sciencey unless you want to. Do we really think that there's something different about communities with women and communities with men? I'll throw Julie on the fire there. I wait for the hard, spicy questions, some of them until the end, so that you guys are hopefully warmed up and not scared of me.
I don't think we're romanticizing it. I think there's just a different energy when it's a community for women by women. And I say this all the time. Yes, I speak mostly to women, but I do have male clients that have succeeded in launching and we worked well together. But I think there's something safer about a space with women. And I think that we know when you're in a room full of women, you're more likely to find genuine connection than when it's mixed. Because even just the way we behave in a mixed room versus a all women space, right? Um, I think for me, it's my hardest part is the online space, working from home. I even though I get to talk to great women all the time, it's not as connective as when I worked in a physical place with other people. And so I think my biggest heart is romanticizing joining a group or being a part of a community means I'm going to feel that connection. And if I don't, like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not getting what I'm looking for? Right. But a lot of that is just the space and the online space. So that's something that's harder for me.
That's fair.
But I do see it differently for sure when it's a woman's space.
Yeah, I guess that one of the things that's a flaw with this question is I can honestly say that I don't think I've never been a part of a men's only community, so I don't have that experience. All right, so Kelly, what do you think about the differences between women's and men's community? Is it a real thing? Is it romanticized? And I guess another element that somebody mentioned is like when we build these communities of women and apply maybe menish rules.
Yeah. I think it's the company you keep, honestly. I think it's a case by case basis as far as which people are in said group or community. Um, a lot of the women who are coming into my life or have already come into my life and been in my life for a long time are very like spiritually aligned and very like soul-led, heart-led, and I can tell a huge difference when I work with or talk to women who are in that headspace versus someone who's maybe like in their masculine a little bit more. So I guess there's kind of the male female conversation that's coming into play with that. There's always this influence from the, I don't know, like ROI is important, I guess, when you're talking about business, but like the LinkedIn lingo, when I see women kind of adapting that like sales bro-y, techie kind of language, it just gives me a visceral reaction. And I'm like, I need to just go towards women who are kind of in their intuition and leading with their inner voice and connected on more of a spiritual level. So in those situations, absolutely, we are not romanticizing it.
I love that. What Candace, who's not here today, she has an auto reply that she sends back to people, and she's like, "Your pitch smacks of 1990s marketing, bro. Drive through or something like that." I've made it up.
Yeah.
But like that's her. That she's like, she cannot take it. She cannot take it. So she's with you. How about you, Samantha? Do you think it's a real thing? Do you think that we sometimes romanticize the impact of having women together in community and collaboration, or how does it show up for you?
I am going to get a little sciencey because I
Yeah,
love
go for it.
research.
Yes.
And it's shown in research that women show up differently when they are in a mixed gender room. And so I think having women only spaces is super important because I definitely think that men and women obviously should network together, get together, all of that. But women do show up very differently when they are in a women only room. And so it allows them to show up more because men tend to take over when there's women in the room. Like men
Yes.
tend to lead more, they tend to talk more, women tend to not talk as much. And so if we really want to show up, then I think the women only rooms are important. I mean, women should be able to show up how they want in men and women rooms too, but that's not a place that we have gotten to quite yet. And so I love being in rooms with just women because women show up so differently and they tend to be more heart-led, like Kelly was saying. Like when women show up, I went on a call once, it was a connection call, it wasn't even a sales call, and this woman just started instantly selling to me, and I was like so turned off by that. I almost left the networking group that I was in because I was like, you said this was not how this was supposed to go. I am not about this. I don't want to be sold to. Because I went to a different group. I had just come from a different networking group where I did 12 connections and 10 out of the 12 were just selling to me. Like, what can you do for me? What can you do for me? This is how I can help you. And they didn't ask anything about me or my business. And so it's really important to me to connect with someone first and then let business follow. And I feel like I get that more in women only spaces.
I think there's a lot of truth in there. I will also say
Yeah.
that in my experience, sometimes it can go too far. Like if you
Yeah.
if you're in a co-ed networking group, like you talk to girls and guys, and the guy's like, I sell socks. Would you like to buy socks? Right? And it's sort of aggressive, and maybe you don't do it. But I've had hundreds of conversations with women. Sometimes I'm like, at the end of 30 minutes, I'm like, I don't even know, like, what do you do? Like what is, and so, I think that there's nuance in it in all sorts of places, but I'd love that you knew, because I've never seen that there's data that shows that we do show up differently. The observationally, I have absolutely seen in conferences and places where there's a mixed platform, even if there's a woman on a panel, she maybe is introduced differently, or she doesn't get spoken to as much, or she's given the role of spokesperson in the front instead of an expert on equal level, even if she has a resume. But all of that is just anecdotal, and I never know whether or not it's me like looking for what I want to see. And so I appreciate that there are people out there that are studying it and doing that, because one of the things with, media historically has been run by men. Women have been a part of it for my whole life, for sure, absolutely for sure. But, one of my bets on this is like one of the roles of women in media is maybe creating actual opportunities for growth for other women, because we can't assume that it's going to happen from somewhere else.
Well, and I also think because of this that it's also part of our responsibility to create spaces where women feel safe and feel seen and heard, and I try to do that. Sometimes I'm better at it than others, but like I want to be in a space where any woman feels safe asking any question and doesn't think like this is stupid or people are going to look at me like I don't know what I'm doing. It's like we all start at zero. We all start somewhere, right? We
Mm-hmm.
only know what we know. And so I definitely find those spaces better. And I have been in some women's spaces where they talk about money and they post, this is how much I made this month. And it's like, to me, that's the bro coming out. Because yes, we should be proud of what we make and how successful we are. But when we start using numbers like that, I always feel like, oh, okay, so now I haven't made that, so you're going to see me as less than, right? So some of it's our own mentality, but it's also the way we present ourselves and how we create the space for others.
All right, so I have one more question that's a fun question. I'm going to get to it, and I'm going to highlight Julie. So we've been talking a lot about being creators, and now I want you to think of yourselves as a fan or a part of the audience or a community, okay? So like somebody that you're in the audience, you're a fan. This can be a musical artist. This could be like, La Boo Boo, like, this could be a product. What is the most feral thing you've ever done as a fan or in somebody's community? And do you regret it? Have you made a crazy purchase? Did you buy out a store? Did you stay up all night to get tickets? Or just yesterday, I spent 2 hours with 2 computers open trying to get Daisy Chain Festival tickets. Did not get off the waiting room. Anyway, Julie, what's the most feral thing you've ever done as a fan?
Well, I mean, if we really want to go feral, we can talk about, 1990 New Kids on the Block concert.
There you go. This is exactly what I'm looking for. No, this is exactly what I'm looking for.
I was that girl. Posters, I had Joey Doll, I had I had all of it. And then my poor older sister had to go with me to Dodger Stadium to see them live. But it was amazing. But I've also been that. Like, I remember sitting at my desk at a job, like, probably a decade ago, trying to get Adele concert tickets. And it was that just like, I'm being paid to just sit here and just keep waiting for it to refresh. So, but I will say there have been some ones that later I went, why did I send that message to that person? Like, they don't know me. They didn't need to hear that. But, I think it's just we're all looking for that connection. So sometimes the feralness or the fandom comes because they do such a great job at connecting with people that you feel like you can reach out and say something.
All right, Callie, how about you? Have you ever done anything out there? Do you have a collection of stuffed animals hiding in a room? Have you been throwing underwear onto a stage?
Like trying to think. I'm married to a musician, so I'm around the music world all the time.
There you go.
I'm like, I have to play it cool when I'm like, if I see someone who I'm like obsessed with, I have to be cool. I'm the bass player's wife, I got to be the bass player energy. But let's see. When I was 12, I wrote a letter to Brad Renfro. I had a huge crush on him. I never heard anything back, and then he died from an overdose like 4 years later or something. Not saying that it was connected to my letter, but um I kind of YOLO'd the other day, and I found this YouTuber whose account I loved, and I love the content she's putting out, and I feel like we're aligned. So I just emailed her. She has her email address in there. I was like, I'm just gonna, and I was really honest, just like super authentic. We'll see if she writes me back, but it's like I just feel like we're soul sisters, I'm like, I'm just gonna lean into that like super soulful side of myself as much as possible. But I have more stories about music stuff, so we can talk about that another time. But
I bet you do. Oh my gosh, I bet you do. All right, I'm super interested, Samantha. What's the most feral thing you've done as a fan, and do you regret it?
The most when I was feeling all the audacity, I messaged Dr. Temple Grandin
I
and said, "Will
noticed.
you be on my
Oh,
podcast?" And she said yes. And I was like, oh. So
that's
then that
amazing.
gave me the confidence to go ask other like people to be on my podcast. And some of them said yes, and some of them never responded. So yeah, but getting her on my podcast was
That's so cool.
amazing. And so, yeah. And then I will say, like, with musicians, I YOLO'd one day and I was like, I have to go to the Eras tour. But it was after all, like, she'd already been in the US and but then she opened up like 3 more cities. And I was in a co-working space, dead silent, and I literally screamed when I got into the waiting room and got into the place to buy the tickets.
Right.
And I didn't have to buy resale tickets. I got like the original tickets, and so they weren't like $1 million, you know? And I screamed and I jumped up and I was like, yes! And everyone looked at me and I was like, I'm just really excited right now, okay? I got into Taylor Swift. And they're like, cool, good for you. And then
I
I
love
flew across
it.
the country. Yeah, and then I flew across the country to go to her concert because I live in Idaho. The concert was in Florida. And so that was like, I don't know why, because I love going to concerts. Going to concerts is my love language. But I've never been like, I must go to this concert. And for that, I was like, I must go. And so I did. And
I'm
And
it
you
was
sure it
did,
was
and
awesome.
you
worth
had
it. Yeah.
everybody says it was
It
worth
was
it. And
worth
she
it.
got to have lunch with me in
Yeah,
Coral
yeah.
Springs. That was
Oh,
a
That was the
super
best
fun
part.
thing. That was a super fun thing. All right, you guys,
Yeah.
we're at the end of the hour. It does go fast when I have this room full of people who are such good talkers. I want to thank all of my guests. Julie disappeared at the tail end because she has a meeting she hosts right at the end of this. I have to get the scheduling together so that that does not happen. I do want to thank everybody for my panelists, for being here and being a part of the conversation. The July panel, I think the topic is going to be burnout and sustainability as indie creators. And if you want to be a part of that and a part of this project, just reach out and let me know. Thank you very much. That's a wrap, and we're out.